Final Fantasy. A name everyone that is even vaguely familiar with games, and even some that aren't, know. Most people have played at least one of its various entries over the course of the series' long lifetime. Supposedly, Hironobu Sakaguchi, the original game's director, chose the name Final Fantasy because Square Enix, back then just Square, was facing bankruptcy, and this could have been their last game to put out if it wasn't a success. And what a success it was! With over 1.3 million copies of the original NES version sold worldwide and through many re-releases and remakes boasting over 5 million overall unit sales, Square's swan song turned into a golden goose that not only saved the company but also revolutionized and popularized the JRPG genre to be the behemoth it is today. But what exactly did Sakaguchi-san and his team put out that could have spawned such a massive legacy and cult following? In the year of 2022, Final Fantasy is celebrating its 35th anniversary. And what better way to find out just how good the series' oldest title actually is by playing the recently released Pixel Remaster version. Welcome to the Backlog Project, where we play through a gigantic list of games to find out which of them is worth being put onto your backlog. Final Fantasy has been a staple in my gaming repertoire for many years now. When 13 was about to come out, I really wanted to play it, but it felt kinda weird playing the 13th entry in a series, so I binge played all of them and have been a big fan ever since. I've also been playing 14 since its launch, and it has since then become my favorite and most played game of all time. So it only felt fitting to start the Backlog Project with the game that started it all. This is what you are first greeted with when you boot up the game. The nostalgic title music plays while the game's title art sits on a pure white background. You hit a button and are directly familiarized with the menu navigation sound, one you will hear many times throughout your journey. You press New Game and are instantly tasked with a monumental decision that will shape your whole playthrough. Which classes will you choose for your 4 party members? You get to choose between 6. The Burly Warrior, the Nimble Thief, the Barehanded Monk, the Destructive Black Mage, the Healing White Mage, and the Versatile Red Mage. Since the game only gives you a very brief overview of what each job can do in the form of a single sentence, you cannot really make an informed decision without consulting guides or other out-of-game knowledge. Thankfully, we live in times where information is very easy to come by, and we're playing one of the JRPG genre's founding fathers, so most people associate a pretty specific toolkit with each of these classes. It is, however, still worth pointing out that the game doesn't really make anything clear here. Now that your party is set up, you press Done, and the game takes you straight into a cutscene explaining the general story and setting. You are the Warriors of Light, a prophesized group of heroes, each bearing a depleted crystal on your journey to restore the crystal's light by defeating the 4 evil fiends plaguing the world and robbing it of its life force. But first, you are stranded on the continent of Cornelia, with a broken bridge keeping you from fulfilling the prophecy and saving the world, and the king conditioning said bridge's repair behind you, saving his daughter, Princess Sarah, from the clutches of one of his knights gone rogue, Garland. The game's story takes you to many different locales, like poison caves, towers inhabited by the still working robots built by a fallen civilization, and even to an underwater ruin populated by mermaids, among many other things. Never will you visit a new point on the world map and ask yourself, haven't I been here before? Everything is unique and feels like it has a place in the world that was seniorized by Kenji Terada based on Sakaguchi's original storyboard. However, while the world building is fantastic, the story itself never goes any further than the base premise that is set up in the first 15 minutes of the game. I don't want to get any deeper into spoiler territory, so I won't explicate any further, but let me just say that there is a pretty significant plot twist towards the end of the game, which is something you wouldn't expect from a game this old. Just don't expect the story to hook you like a modern game or a book. Your party members are completely mute, given character and depth by just their animations, like celebrating when winning a battle or doing a little dance when finding a key item. Villains are just what the name implies, evil for the sake of being evil. There are some important named NPCs that are used to further the story in key moments, with some even having cute little quirks, like Princess Sarah having a crush on her saviors. Don't ask me how this plays out if your party consists of 4 white mages, the only female job in the game, but none of them stand out as well written or memorable. As expected of a 35-year-old game, the graphics of this game are nothing to write home about in the grand scheme of things, but if you don't mind or even like pixel graphics, this game is gorgeous. Holy crap, there are little details that make this pixel remaster stand out from so many other pixel style games. It is unbelievable. There's fog in ruins, wind blowing through the trees in forests, sunshine reflected in the water, and don't even get me started on the battle animations. Sure, we're not talking Octopath Traveler levels of detail here, but the spell animations in this remaster are a definite highlight and make having magic users in your party an absolute joy. Oh, and while we're on the topic of highlights, Nobuo Uematsu's soundtrack has been rearranged and modernized, and if you haven't noticed by the background music by now, they did a stellar job at it. Turning 8-bit music into modern tracks with instruments and an actual sound stage can easily lead to the music being unrecognizable remix-ish versions of themselves. Here, the remastered soundtrack feels like it is exactly as Uematsu-san envisioned it when he first wrote the score, but couldn't implement it because of the NES's hardware limitations. Classics like the opening theme, Matoya's Cave, or the series staple Prelude feel epic yet nostalgic, and the battle tracks are an orgy of rock music and trumpets that you just can't help but bob your head to. Sound effects have also been enhanced. Every weapon has a distinct sound, and using thunder magic with headphones on will make you wonder if you're actually playing a game from 1987, albeit remastered. Alright, we're about to get into the topic that probably everybody wants to hear about, gameplay. But first, I just quickly want to throw out, if this video has helped you in any way, consider subscribing to it and maybe giving it a like. It really helps me out. Let me preface this by telling you my party setup. I went with a warrior, a monk, a white, and a black mage. If you go for a less traditional setup, your experience may obviously vary, but I'm trying to keep this as broad as possible. Combat in this game is completely turn-based and not overly complicated. You can attack, use items, use magic, flee, or defend. Defending doesn't really do a lot, and most enemies are easy enough to beat that you probably will mostly be attacking or using magic. There are no different skills for your melee attackers, so if they're not using an item, they attack. Choosing your magic user's commands is a bit more involved, with many offensive, defensive, and supporting spells in the game. There are even elemental weaknesses to exploit and resistances to look out for. You don't know who attacks when, and put in all characters' commands before the round starts, so combat comes down more to reacting to what happened in the last turn than actual strategizing. As is expected of a retro JRPG, the encounter rate is pretty high enough to be annoying at times, especially if you're trying to explore in a place where enemies aren't posing any challenge to you anymore. However, the remaster gives you an amazing tool for dealing with that: auto battle. What this does is, it will use your last inputs for as long as you have auto battle enabled, while also speeding up animations. No fancy AI calculating the best action. The only intelligent part about the system is that if your character can, for whatever reason, not repeat an action, they will default to attacking. So if, for example, your Black Mage was set to spam fire, but his MP runs out, he will not stand there doing nothing, but attack with his staff for minimal damage, which equals to the same result, but is kinda nice to have. As you may have already guessed, this is also an incredibly useful tool for grinding. Well, that would be true if there wasn't a slight inconsistency here. There is no need for grinding in this game at all, because it is really easy. I played through the whole game without grinding except for 5 minutes in the beginning when I grinded before the first boss that, in hindsight, were entirely misspent because I defeated said boss within 3 turns. That isn't to say there are no parts that could give you trouble. I did get a game over once to the second major boss because he kept spamming multi-target attacks and my white mage couldn't keep up. The final boss was the first one to actually require you to plan a few turns ahead because of some nasty abilities, but at that point I was so stacked out in crazy strong healing match against support items that I could just spam my way through the fight. As you might have noticed from the story segments of this review, the plot isn't as much a grand tale that keeps you hooked, but more of a means to get you to continue exploring the world map, fighting monsters, and talking to NPCs. Hey Nick, why'd you just emphasize talking to NPCs so weirdly, you ask? Well, that's because you will do this a lot. Almost every NPC in this game has something relevant to say. You get loaded with information about potential avenues for treasure and progression in every town, but there's no way to check back that information. The guy 3 towns back who told you what you could do with the item you just found, ain't no quest log in this game, buddy. Either you write down anything that seems important, or you rely on your memory for where to go next if you don't want to scour every single town every single time you get a new key item. Or end up running around like an idiot for half an hour, getting super annoyed at all the random encounters you have to deal with just because you didn't pay attention to some random line of text an NPC threw at you hours ago. Never happened to me, I swear. There's a minimap to the top right of the screen in this remaster, so finding your way around is a relatively simple matter. Towns, dungeons, and other things you can enter are also marked on this map when you visit them once, so finding a place again is very easy. The map is also very small and condensed, making navigation a breeze. Dungeons, on the other hand, can be a real bitch to navigate at times. They don't feature any sorts of puzzles or other brain teasers, and most are laid out well enough so you know where you've already been and where you haven't. But some of the later ones are a little too big and have really long corridors that lead to a dead end, which is especially annoying considering the high encounter rate of the game. Exploration is often worth it though, with hundreds of treasure chests that are filled to the brim with new gear, items, money, and sometimes monsters that result in hefty XP gains. There also aren't any post-game dungeons or challenges at all. You beat the game, that's it. Maybe you go for achievements you missed, most of which are story-based anyway, like opening every treasure chest or filling the bestiary with the last few monsters that you haven't encountered. There is a small sliding puzzle minigame you can open up by pressing a specific button combination when on your ship, but even for someone like me who is terrible at puzzle games, it took less than 10 minutes to solve, so let's just say there isn't really any post-game content in this game. Solving it does max your money, however, so if you don't mind cheating a little if you're stuck, there you go. Beating the game does unlock Sound Select, where you can listen to the game's whole OST through a little media player, and an artwork section with lots of original art by the series' incredible artist Yoshitaka Amano that is well worth checking out. Final Fantasy I's UI is very simple but effective. Everything from equipment to stats and spells is easy to find and navigate. You can auto-sort items into different categories, learn and unlearn magic, and there's even a button for automatically optimizing the items your characters are wearing. Just don't use this on monks, they perform better without items equipped and the game doesn't tell you that. Controls are also customizable for keyboard as well as gamepad. While we're on the topic of items, there's the typical JRPG stuff. Healing potions, status ailment cures, ethers to restore MP, and equipment. Equipment comes in the form of weapons and shields, and armor for your head, body, and arms. Armor is just that, it gives you defensive and evasion bonuses, and sometimes neat stuff like elemental resistance or immunity to debuffs. Weapons, on the other hand, are a little more important to know how they work, because where mage characters have a lot of different choices to make in battle, melee characters make these choices in their equipment screen, that you can also access and change in battle. Weapons give you two stats, attack and accuracy. Attack is just the plain damage stat of the weapon that your character gets from it. Accuracy isn't exactly what you might think it is though. There isn't really a chance to miss in this game, as there is a chance to not hit. What's the difference, you ask? Any given class has a number of hits it will perform when given the attack action. The accuracy stat, which is a percentage, then determines how many of these potential hits are actually executed. Let's say your warrior with a maximum of 8 hits per turn has 100% accuracy. He will hit 8 times. Equip a weapon that has only 80 accuracy, and his hit count will go down by 20% to 6.4, so 6 hits per turn. This is further modified by status buffs and debuffs that in or decrease these percentages, and weapons having special effects like doing more damage against a specific enemy type. This gives a little more depth to the melee combat because you can and should always be on the lookout for not only the weapon that has the highest attack stat, but the one that will yield the most damage in actual combat against a specific enemy. I did say magic users have a lot of different spells they can use, but they don't just learn them by leveling up as you would expect. Instead, each character has 3 of what the game calls magic slots for each of the 8 levels of magic there are in the game, so the potential to learn up to 24 different spells of magic. These are learned at shops. You buy them, equip them in the slot, and from then on your character can use that spell, if you have MP. MP in Final Fantasy I works a little different than it does in most other role-playing games. See the MP bar? Looks kinda weird, doesn't it? These 8 numbers represent the MP your character has left in the respective spell level. As I said, 8 levels of magic, so 8 numbers from top left to bottom right. But Nick, you might ask, how do we know how much max MP a character has? Well, go into the magic menu and you'll see a way larger but slightly less confusing screen. This is a list of all the magic your character has learned, how much max MP they have for each level, and how much MP they have left. Just to give you a quick example, if Flora, my white mage, uses her level 1 magic cure, the MP goes down by 1. but only for that level of magic. So even if she uses all her level 1 MP, it does not affect the usability of her other level spells at all. This might seem a little convoluted, but in practice is very interesting and a fun magic system that I wouldn't mind to see other titles adapt and expand upon. Sorry for the info dump on this, but I thought it was very important to include these systems here because they are very in-depth and unique, especially for a game that was originally released on the NES. Saving in Final Fantasy is painless and honestly takes a little of the challenge out of the game. You can save anywhere you want on the world map, and you can make a quick save anywhere in the game. The only difference is that quick saving only allows you to overwrite your current save file without creating any new ones. Since there is no point of no return in the game and also no missables, there really is little meaning to having multiple saves anyway. Also, the game autosaves when you change screens, so going down a floor of a dungeon creates an autosave that you can then load up if you happen to get a game over. All in all, this just means you never lose any of your progress even if you die. The worst that could happen is you losing a few minutes you spend on any given floor. There really isn't any like your first one, and for me and many others, that is Final Fantasy 1. It doesn't do anything perfectly. The story is basic, the battle system can't hold a candle to most other JRPGs in terms of strategy and complexity, and with just over 11 hours for a blind playthrough, it's rather short as well. That said, there is something magical about playing this first game in a series as big and influential as Final Fantasy. From your first step into the world accompanied by the incredible soundtrack, to you working your way through all sorts of towns, dungeons, caves, until you finally overcome all these fiends and face off against the final boss, there is always something new to see, hear, or fight. And if you've already played one of its many versions, even better. You get to experience a rush of nostalgia while you see what has been changed and made even better about a game you have fond memories of. Do you like RPGs, retro gaming, or are just generally interested in gaming history? If the answer to all of these is no, then I thank you for sticking around for so long, but Final Fantasy 1 is probably not going to be the game for you. If, however, the answer to any of these questions is yes, then my answer is also yes. This game is definitely worth putting on your backlog. If you answered yes to 2, or maybe even all of the questions, then you should even go play the game immediately. It's definitely worth it.